So we are back together again. Screwtape letters. We're on letter 20 and had great fun with the last one. Has moved us in a personal perspective direction with Screwtape right now, talking about body types or about body behavior last time, and then this time it's going to go into a little more detail about body types and other things and justification for changing. So it's going to be good. Let's see. Oh, that is interesting. So they've changed the layout. I'm going to turn this on and you have to tell me if you get it, because the two okay. We'll see if that works. They've got new options for controls. All right, let's see if this works. Let's see. Tell me what you see.
Nothing yet.
Nothing yet. All right.
Well,
got,
Screwtape
I got
letters.
the YouTube page, yeah.
Do you see the YouTube page?
Yes.
I do.
Is it the whole screen?
Yes.
Okay. Well, let's see. Now, let's see if you can hear it. I'm going to turn it on. If you can't hear it, then give me a shout.
Letter 20. My dear Wormwood, I note with great displeasure that the enemy has, for the time being, put a forcible end to your direct attacks on the patient's chastity. You ought to have known that he always does in the end, and you ought to have stopped before you reached that stage. For as things are, your man has now discovered the dangerous truth, that these attacks don't last forever. Consequently, you cannot use again what is, after all, our best weapon, the belief of ignorant humans that there is no hope of getting rid of us except by yielding. I suppose you've tried persuading him that chastity is unhealthy. I haven't yet got a report from you on young women in the neighborhood. I should like it at once, for if we can't use his sexuality to make him unchaste, we must try to use it for the promotion of a desirable marriage. In the meantime, I should like to give you some hint about the type of woman, I mean the physical type, which he should be encouraged to fall in love with, if falling in love is the best that we can manage. In a rough and ready way, of course, this question is decided for us by spirits far deeper down in the lowerarchy than you and I. It is the business of these great masters to produce in every age a general misdirection of what may be called sexual taste. This they do by working through the small circle of popular artists, dressmakers, actresses, and advertisers who determine the fashionable type. The aim is to guide each sex away from those members of the other with whom spiritually helpful, happy, and fertile marriages are most likely. Thus, we have now for many centuries triumphed over nature to the extent of making certain secondary characteristics of the male, such as the beard, disagreeable to nearly all the females. And there is more in that than you might suppose. As regards the male taste, we have varied a good deal. At one time, we have directed it to the statuesque and aristocratic type of beauty, mixing men's vanity with their desires and encouraging the race to breed chiefly from the most arrogant and prodigal women. At another, we have selected an exaggeratedly feminine type, faint and languishing, so that the folly and cowardice, and all the general falseness and littleness of mind which go with them, shall be at a premium. At present, we are on the opposite tack. The age of jazz has succeeded the age of the waltz, and we now teach men to like women whose bodies are scarcely distinguishable from those of boys. Since this is a kind of beauty even more transitory than most, we thus aggravate the female's chronic horror of growing old, with many excellent results, and render her less winning and less able to bear children. And that is not all. We have engineered a great increase in the license which society allows to the representation of the apparent nude, not the real nude, in art and its exhibition on the stage or the bathing beach. It is all a fake, of course, The figures in the popular art are falsely drawn. The real women in bathing suits or tights are actually pinched in and propped up to make them appear firmer and more slender and more boyish than nature allows a full-grown woman to be. Yet, at the same time, the modern world is taught to believe that it is being frank and healthy and getting back to nature. As a result, we are more and more directing the desires of men to something which does not exist, making the role of the eye in sexuality more and more important, and at the same time making its demands more and more impossible. What follows, you can easily forecast. That is the general strategy of the moment. But inside that framework, you will still find it possible to encourage your patient's desires in one of two directions. You will find, if you look carefully into any human's heart, that he is haunted by at least two imaginary women, a terrestrial and an infernal Venus, and that his desire differs qualitatively according to its object. There is one type for which his desire is such as to be naturally amenable to the enemy, readily mixed with charity, readily obedient to marriage, coloured all through with that golden light of reverence and naturalist which we detest. There is another type which he desires brutally and desires to desire brutally, a type best used to draw him away from marriage altogether, but which, even within marriage, he would tend to treat as a slave, an idol, or an accomplice. His love for the first might involve what the enemy calls evil, but only accidentally. The man would wish that she was not someone else's wife and be sorry he could not love her lawfully. But in the second type, the felt evil is what he wants. It is that tang in the flavor which he is after. In the face, it is the visible animality or sulkiness or craft or cruelty which he likes. And in the body, something quite different from what he ordinarily calls beauty, something he may even, in a sane hour, describe as ugliness, but which by our art can be made to play on the raw nerve of his private obsession. The real use of the infernal Venus is, no doubt, as prostitute or mistress, but if your man is a Christian, and if he has been well trained in nonsense about irresistible and all-excusing love, he can often be induced to marry her, and that is very well worth bringing about. You will have failed as regards fornication and solitary vice, but there are other and more indirect methods of using a man's sexuality to his undoing. And by the way, they are not only efficient, but delightful. The unhappiness produced is of a very lasting and exquisite kind. Your affectionate uncle, Screwtape.
Okay.
Oh, I got, oh, oh.
Lots and lots going on there. It's I hardly know where to start. Does anybody want to chime in about anything in that you heard?
Well, I feel like there's at least 5 different things to cover.
Absolutely.
Well, if I can start, I feel he talked about, oh, geez, someone else go first. I just, so good.
Well, there's a little part in the beginning that you may have missed, because by the time we get into the middle of it, it gets so meaty that the peripheral gets kind of shut off. So he begins with saying of course, he's displeased at Wormwood. He's not doing a good job, so he's chastising Wormwood. Now you remember just 2 letters ago is when Screwtape said he did that mea culpa and I'm sorry and I'm going to protect you and I really didn't mean what I had to say about God actually loving the beasts, which he said back in letter 14. So now, after securing that Wormwood is not going to show his letters to anyone, he's coming back to himself a little bit and chastising Wormwood here for doing a bad job. You ought to have known that he always does it in the end, and you should have stopped before you reach that point. For as things are, your man has now discovered the dangerous truth that these attacks don't last forever. Consequently, you cannot use again what is, after all, our best weapon. And here is the little bit that's often missed. The belief of the ignorant humans that there is no hope of getting rid of us except by yielding.
Oh, that's something that I rang very true to me when I was listening. One, it sounds really stupid, but you know the trope in horror movies where, you know, they have to call a priest because there's a demon and
Sure.
in the house, and it's just like the demons always win. And I'm like, that's not really what we're taught. Like, it's just they're either really weak-willed or I don't know. It's just this feels a lot more realistic. It just
Well, this actually goes to a dark place, and it's sad, but he's ringing on something else too that comes up in the problem of pain, and that is suicide. So you think about this, and as I said again, the belief of ignorant humans that there's no hope of getting rid of us except by yielding. So it's this place that where what Screwtape is suggesting that by their craft, by Wormwood's craft, that God is so completely shut out that the person is so reflective. They're looking in the mirror so completely that they cannot see any way out of whatever it is that they are in. And since there's no way of getting rid of the problem, the demons that afflict me, then the only thing I can do is end it. I can't stand it anymore. I worked with suicide prevention in California for years. I was just talking with somebody here who had me worried about 4 days ago, came by the church because she's using the same language and saying that there's, you know, she can't stand it anymore and there's no way out and there's nothing to do. And she's tried everything and nothing works. And, you know, these absolute words, blocking out the sun, you know, S-O-N, blocking out the sun, blocking out everything. So thoroughly buried in this idea that there's no hope, that it leads people to that extreme. And it's exactly, he puts in there just one line. It's just one line here, but it's a really big line, important not to miss. Okay, I have oh, go ahead.
What does he mean by the enemy always will put a forcible end? How does God do that? I know it's talking about God will put a forcible end. How do we think that happens?
He's referring to some kind of inspiration in the individual. If there's a reprieve, that the person who is succumbing or being afflicted by this has a reprieve. There's an offer that God has to get you out of the place that you're in if you take the offer. So it's always present. He's saying, you know, he'll always give you a reprieve if the guy takes it, but the guy actually took it. So he said, if you hadn't been pushing him so hard into this corner where he was getting in a panic about what's going to happen, he wouldn't have reached out to God as a happenstance. You know, oh, you know, I can't do anything else. I might as well give God a shot. And God's always there with the door open waiting for you. So he became aware of it and grabbed that line. Whereas if Wormwood had just taken a lesser tack, kept the pressure on, but not to a boiling point, then the guy wouldn't have turned to God and would have kept trying to manage himself by his own will and fallen.
Gotcha.
Yep.
Okay.
sounds like a leap into faith.
Sounds like what?
A leap into faith.
Yes, absolutely. It's, you know, that's the place where people go that either do leap into faith or they don't. But what the scripture tells us and what Lewis is using out of the mouth of Screwtape is that God is always there with a handout. God is always ready to lift us up, to take us in, to protect us. It's our, you know, refusing that handout, that hand, that lift up, that causes the problem. Years ago, I did a series on a movie called Absolution with Mimi Rogers. I don't know if you remember her. She was a small time actress, and the guy from Mulder from X-Files. That's
Oh, I know who you're talking about.
it was at the height of the X-Files this movie was made. And I won't bore you with the whole thing, although it's theologically so well done. But at the very end, it's the apocalypse. So the world's ending. And this woman whose daughter has died had reached the end of her rope. She was about to commit suicide. And she finds herself in this nothingness, purgatory. And God reaches out to her and says, come with me, and everything will be okay. And she says, no, I won't. I could never go with a God who would allow my baby to be killed.
But she killed her.
Yeah.
That was called the Rapture, I think.
Oh, the rapture, that was it. Yep, the rapture.
David Duchovny.
Yes. So that echoes what Lewis is talking about all the way through here. And in Mere Christianity, The Problem of Pain, it echoes his theology straight through and through, where he says that hell is locked from the inside. So he says people that are in hell by choice. They're people who have rejected the offer for salvation. They've rejected God's last handout, like Mimi Rogers in that movie. She was very logical about what she was saying, that I forgot that she'd done it. She killed her daughter. And if God was a God that loved and God that cared and God that wanted to preserve life, then God would have stopped her from killing her own daughter. So when she finds herself in basically a purgatory preempt to hell, and God comes to her in the manner of her daughter. Remember, he sends her daughter and says, come with me and it'll all be okay. She says, no, I won't do that. I can't go to a place with a God who would fail me in that way. So you see how the image there is the person in hell thinking only about themselves. Mm-hmm. And in an odd sort of way, God's reward to them, or God's option for them, is also about themselves. But the also about themselves is in relationship with God. You cannot have this unless you come with me. But she is thinking all the way about herself, and she won't go with him, because someone who's completely narcissistic and thinks about themselves can't think of anything else. They won't accept anything from anybody at any time because it's all about them. So Lewis is saying that's who's in hell. It's the people who are actually given and know the option is there and reject it. So I've seen that. We've all had that happen in our lives, haven't we? Somebody who needed help and we offer help, and just out of pride or whatever it is, they reject our help, and you walk away going, well, what can you do? They just won't do it. There's
you can't help somebody that's not going to help themselves.
Yeah.
And the first step is accepting someone's assistance.
Yes.
I think.
Yeah, that's exactly right. That's exactly what Lewis is saying here. One line says it all. Okay, so he gets down here at the bottom. I'm talking about the young women in a desirable marriage, which is what he gets into at the very end of the letter. And then he does this wonderful litany about the physical types and about the corruption. He says, we do this by working through the small and popular circle of artists, dressmakers, actresses, and advertisers. And my mind goes straight to those all of the Stars magazines and the Fifth Avenue magazines and all the advertisements in young ladies and women's magazines with the women who are, out on the town in New York at like 11 o'clock with all the lights behind them, and the water and the streets are wet. Have you ever noticed that? They're always walking down streets that are wet, and she's wearing this slinky dress, and she's just thrown her hair back, which is being shined through by the window behind her. And in that window, there's another picture of another woman wearing the same kind of dress, and it's an advertisement for the dress. So if you wear this dress, that's what you're going to look like, and that's the kind of thing they're going to do.
Not just that, though. It's sort of a trickle-down effect, because have you guys ever been on TikTok?
Yes.
Yeah.
Okay, well, it's a cesspit, and yes, it's a cesspit. But the thing is, there are influencers on there who get inspiration from the people on the magazines to really simplify it, but it trickles down, and then like even younger kids, like 8-year-olds, are like watching these people just, it's completely fake. They're they're like, I'm in Paris, when they're probably in like Paris, Texas. It's but it's absolutely horrifying to watch because it's not to sound alarmist, but it's corrupting their minds in like the
Yeah.
worst way.
Oh,
It's
yeah.
impacting their development, and I
Yeah.
could go on all day about this, but that's what I thought when I heard that.
You all may not remember this, or you may, but I think it was in the 80s that this was taken up by Congress. Congress got on board and put the Madison Avenue, called congressional hearings to have the CEOs of the advertisers come in because they said that the effect of the advertisement was causing suicides and disruption in the world, and it's targeted specifically at young women, preteen and teen women. And you watch the change in the way that children are behaving, dressing, and thinking. And where's it coming from? Well, that's where it's coming from.
Media, yeah, all medias. And Lewis
Can I
knew
just-
80 years ago,
Yeah, 1930, right?
and almost 90 years, yeah, over 90 years ago.
There's
Can
a
Can I just
Dove.
say, I'm
where
sorry.
Sorry, there's a Dove commercial where they show what it takes to get a model ready for a photo shoot. And basically it takes a real looking person and makes them into a fake looking person.
Yeah.
And then they also actually change the eyes, by using computer graphics. They also thin out the eyes and do a couple other things that are actually not just makeup, but also
Right.
computer changes. So they basically transformed this nice, pretty looking lady into this beautiful, unrealistic
Right.
goddess that's unattainable, basically.
Yep. Yep. There was a couple that I knew. This is true. This is absolutely true. I tell you. And I stayed at their house overnight, and I woke up early in the morning because I heard noises upstairs. I was down in the basement room, and I went upstairs, and she was in an absolute panic, running around the house, rifling through her bags and going through stashes and all this other stuff. And for one thing, I mean, I'm not being mean, but I almost didn't recognize her. And her panic was because they'd been together for years. I think probably at that point, it's probably 7, 8 years. She had gotten up every morning before he got up and put on all her makeup, dressed herself up. And she got up that morning, and whatever she was supposed to put on, the base or whatever, the blending stuff that the women use, some women use, she didn't have anymore. So she was downstairs looking in her purse and in her stash and another thing, trying to find some stuff because she couldn't put her face on without the stuff, and she couldn't show her face to her husband because she didn't look like the woman who had all the stuff on. And I had to agree, she didn't look like the woman with all the stuff on because she had made herself she had her eyes all, little lines that make her eyes look thinner and all that other stuff. She really did look dramatically different, but the length that she went to create this false person,
Well, to live a lie.
yeah. And she left in a bathrobe, in her bathrobe and her slippers. She jumped in the car and left to go to
the store and get some more.
Yes.
My
That's
goodness.
incredibly sad.
Yes. Yes. And she made me promise I wouldn't tell her husband. She said,
Oh,
just tell him I went out. Just tell him I went out and tell him you didn't see me. Don't ever, you didn't see me. You didn't see me. I'm like, okay. And I'm not gonna lie, then I'll tell him that you went out. Yeah.
But what you said, Catherine, it reminded me of something that actually ties back to the suicide thing you mentioned earlier, her father from earlier in the note. The TikTok thing I was mentioning, there's a category where these people are convinced or they pretend that they have dissociative identity disorder, which is multiple personality disorder.
Right.
And there are huge communities where these children, like 12-year-olds, are saying they have 100 plus it's not real, but
That's
they're
child abuse.
teenagers trying to figure out their identity, and it's really distressing, and it's good, some
want-
people do end up killing themselves over it.
Well, they're trying to feel important. They feel like there's no, this is the difference between the Christian faith and no faith and a lot of other faiths. And that is, we know that we are important because God made us.
Mhm.
God made me. And so I'm loved. I'm loved more than I could ever imagine. And when I think about it in my darkest moments, you just can't have those darkest moments if you know that you're loved and cared for, and this person, died for you to make
Mhm.
everything work out all right. But if you don't have any faith, then what's left for you? There's nothing. You have you, and that's it. And if there's really a trauma or a drama going on in your life that is overwhelming you, where do you turn? There's no one to turn to. It's a dead end, completely dead end. So a lot
Go
of
to
these
others
people,
just like you.
they don't have any faith, and so since they're not important, I'm not important. I have to make up a new me, a multi-personality me or whatever me, because that person becomes important. That is impressive, and people want to know about me. So that like this woman. So now, but the facade has to be maintained, and after a while, you can't do it anymore. I mean, I can't believe that she actually. I take it back. They got divorced, probably 4 or 5 years later. Yeah. So they're not together, but she would not be able to maintain that. Who could maintain that? I mean, you can't. So I think that was part of the problem anyway. I think that
She's been doing it for 7 years, you said? 7 or 8 years?
yeah,
Wow.
yeah, unbelievable. Just sheer
To a
willpower.
healthy mind, that's not worth maintaining.
Yeah.
It's an incredibly unhealthy mindset.
Yeah, talking about an intimate lie. Incredible. Okay, listen, he introduces a new term in here. I think it's wonderful. The lowerarchy.
Yeah.
I like that one.
Great term. It's like, Lewis, you're so brilliant. Did you guys ever see Take Me Out to the Ball Game with Gene Kelly and Frank Sinatra? And it's a great movie. If you look real like a period piece, go find Take Me Out to the Ball Game with Gene Kelly. You will not be sorry. But this movie was about the period of the 30s. And one of the things that's happening is the women in the movie talk about having to be crunched. They have corsets on, everything's been put on, so they're just smashed down to a figureless person. They're just straight like a board. And that's the way they want to be. And they have to be that way because that's the only way to be attractive. So it's just amazing now this is counter the other corset era, where the other corset era is to give you that what do they call it?
Hourglass figure.
Hourglass.
Yes, with the little tiny waist.
Yeah.
So this is different from that. This corset thing was meant to flatten everything and get everything just straight. And the women were wearing, these little jackets that just hang straight down to make you look more straight. Ugh, just horrible. What a terrible thing to have to go through. So he's calling that, and what he's saying is true. It's so true, just like my friend, that it can't be maintained. It's a complete fiction, and it's going to break soon. I mean, real soon. It just can't be.
Yeah, the absolute fear of growing old. I don't know exactly what it said.
Yeah.
Something.
The-
Chronic. The chronic horror of growing old, with many excellent results, he says.
Yes, absolutely.
It's a little crazy.
And the last thing I have, so he goes into the terrestrial and the infernal Venus, which I think is a great juxtaposition. But the place where he ends up is, I've had so many experiences with this with people, and this thing where he says down here, if your man is a Christian and if he has been well trained in the nonsense about irresistible and all excusing love, he can often be inclined to marry her. And that is very worth bringing about. You will have fails regards to fornication and solitary vice, but there are other more indirect methods of using man's sexuality as an undoing. And by the way, they are not only efficient, but delightful, the unhappiness that it brings about. I have known so many couples who got married because one of them believed they could fix the other one.
Mhm.
And found out after 5 or 6 years and 2 kids that they can't.
Hmm.
That the person will not be fixed. And it's all excusing love. I love him so much. I'll love him. One person literally told me that they would love him into change. And the
Yeah,
man,
how many times have we heard somebody say all he needed was the love of a good woman?
right. Yeah.
If that's your plan, you better have a plan B.
Every soap opera ever produced said that.
Yeah.
Yes.
Because I watched a lot of those with my mother 30 years ago.
It's this, I've found so many times that the person that is attempting to love the other person, the person that is the object of the attempt is self-centered, self-focused, uncompromising, inconsiderate. So then the person marries them and said, I'm going to show them what it means to give and to love and to be a partner and a servant of the other person. And then they're shocked because 7, 8, 10 years later, the same thing about the person that they're trying to change is the person. So they're just going to use and absorb the service of the other person. They're not going to become one like them. So this is exactly what Lewis is talking about here. Just so spot on about the way people behave and go about. Sadly.
What is he? I'm not sure about the second type of woman here. So he's talking about 2 types.
Yep, terrestrial and infernal.
And what the desires brutally and desires to desire brutally.
Yeah.
That paragraph.
One's readily mixed with charity, readily obedient to marriage, colored all through the golden light of reverence and naturalness, which we detest. And there is another type which he desires brutally, and desire brutally.
Right.
Best used to draw him away from marriage altogether.
Yeah.
But even within marriage, he would tend to treat as a slave, an idol, or an accomplice.
Yeah.
It sounds like he's talking about the female equivalent of a bad boy.
Yeah.
Mhm.
It's the terrestrial Venus. He's really talking about terrestrial. Obviously, that's earthly, So he's talking about the real Venus, the person that's here, the person you can marry. That's why he's saying the golden light of reverence and naturalness, which we detest. It's that the possibility of love with honest love, appropriate love, shared love. But this other one is the fantasy woman. It's the woman that is desired, not because there is he's not looking at this person as a soulmate. He's looking at this person as a product.
The
And
TikTok woman, the TikTok
yeah.
product now.
Yeah. The woman in the Madison Avenue magazines.
Mhm.
Like as a possession to own.
Yeah. Yep.
I have a question.
Shoot.
The part where he's talking about women being terrified of growing old, is it because, well, the demons think that's a good thing because then the women will settle for someone who might tempt them into less than godly ways, if that makes sense? Like,
Sure. All of the above. What would someone do? What would this particular kind of woman do to even in a fantasy to preserve her youth?
okay.
Maybe anything to think. I'm always whenever I hear this, I think of Barry Manilow. There's Barry Manilow's song Copacabana.
Yeah.
And I can't remember their names, but they fall in love.
Lola and Rico.
Lola, oh, you're a Manilow fan.
I like Barry Manilow too.
So they
It
fall in
reminds
love.
me of Faust.
He dies, and then it's 30 years later, she's still there in that dress with the thing on her head and
Yeah.
I get this image of her with all the same makeup on, all duded up looking, not like a person should look at that age. And she's obviously a little whacked. She's lost her mind. So it's this, he's saying that, if beauty and attractiveness are the ultimate goal, and this is going to go away. You cannot help it. It is going to change. It's not going to be able to do it. What lengths would you go to keep that from happening? And again, now think about people in Hollywood getting facelifts and body lifts. Some people did you ever see Burt Reynolds?
Yeah.
In his later life? Oh my gosh.
Or Joan Rivers or somebody like that.
Joan Rivers, yeah, another one.
She couldn't not smile. She'd had so much work done to her face. Her face was primarily
Yeah.
facial
The
recognition.
skin pulled back. Just,
I think of Dolly Parton. I love her, but yeah.
she's done that too. She's got the same thing. Not as much, but her the idea that says I have to stay young, looking young, being young all the time. That's what he's talking about. This person, not only the person that the man is desiring as a fiction, but then that fiction perpetrated on the women who then inculcate it and try to live it. And so it's a win-win for Satan, because he's getting both people on both sides of Madison Avenue, the one looking and the one pretending to be that person. So
I've got one more question. I'm
Sure.
sorry.
No,
Since I missed the first 14 chapters. So how did Wormwood even get this case? Like, he has no training. He's not very good at this.
So there's two things going on here. One, he is Screwtape's nephew, but he's also just recently graduated from Tempter's College. And he's going out. This is his first assignment to get this guy.
Okay.
This person is found for him as an easy mark for the young Tempter. And then he is given that person to corrupt.
I think it's time for a career change. Yeah, he reminds me of my old boss. He got the job because his dad was the owner of the restaurant chain.
Yes, well, see, so this also is something that comes up later on, because Wormwood begins to be too casual with Screwtape. Screwtape is an undersecretary of an entire department and normally would not be having any correspondence with a junior Tempter at all, none. He's only doing this because this is his nephew.
Can I ask for a spoiler? Does Wormwood have to go and get rehab for drug use? That's what happened to my old boss.
No, but I think that's mild compared to what happens to Wormwood. So we will.
Oh no!
More to come.
Yeah, there's much more.
Sorry.
Let's
Oh,
see.
I could say so much. Anyways.
Should we hit 21? We got 20 minutes. What do you think?
I have a quick question before we do.
Sure, go ahead.
Did Lewis ever write or consider writing a version of this from Wormwood's point of view?
Yes, he did. He never got to do it. There's a couple people who've tried to do it. I've read one of them, part of one of them that didn't really live up to
Didn't really work too well.
Yeah.
I would totally read one if it was a comedy.
It would have to have come from Lewis though, because it was it's his thing. I don't think anybody else could read these letters. You can read them 25 times and still not write a suitable
Right.
book from Wormwood's point of view. I don't think it could happen.
I think I shared with you that he was asked many times if he would write a sequel with Screwtape doing more. And he said absolutely not. He would not. He said this little tiny book, he said, just tore him apart. He said it was the hardest thing that he'd written. He was exhausted every day that he did it. It was so emotionally traumatic for him to write this and to put these into pages that he would never ever do it again. So Wormwood was whole nother thing that he was asked if he'd do that, and there was some consideration that he would, because it's that was a completely different perspective. But he never did. Nope. It's a one-off. All right, here comes 21.
5 words you pronounce
That's not
wrong
it.
2 years before your brain starts.
That's gonna
shutting
be.
down.
There we go. All right.
Letter 21. My dear Wormwood, yes. The period of sexual temptation is an excellent time for working in a subordinate attack on the patient's peevishness. It may even be the main attack as long as he thinks it is the subordinate one. But here, as in everything else, the way must be prepared for your moral assault by darkening his intellect. Men are not angered by mere misfortune, but by misfortune conceived as injury. And the sense of injury depends on the feeling that a legitimate claim has been denied. The more claims on life, therefore, that your patient can be induced to make, the more often he will feel injured and, as a result, ill-tempered. Now, you will have noticed that nothing throws him into a passion so easily as to find a tract of time which he reckoned on having at his own disposal unexpectedly taken from him. It is the unexpected visitor when he looked forward to a quiet evening, or the friend's talkative wife turning up when he looked forward to a tete-a-tete with a friend, that throws him out of gear. Now, he is not yet so uncharitable or slothful that these small demands on his courtesy are in themselves too much for him. They anger him because he regards his time as his own and feels that it is being stolen. You must therefore zealously guard in his mind the curious assumption, my time is my own. Let him have the feeling that he starts each day as the lawful possessor of 24 hours. Let him feel as a grievous tax that portion of this property which he has to make over to his employers, and as a generous donation that further portion which he allows to religious duties. But what he must never be permitted to doubt is that the total from which these deductions have been made was, in some mysterious sense, his own personal birthright. You have here a delicate task. The assumption which you want him to go on making is so absurd that if once it is questioned, even we cannot find a shred of argument in its defense. The man can neither make nor retain one moment of time. It all comes to him by pure gift. He might as well regard the moon and the sun as his chattels. He is also, in theory, committed to a total service of the enemy. And if the enemy appeared to him in bodily form and demanded that total service for even one day, he would not refuse. He would be greatly relieved if that one day involved nothing harder than listening to the conversation of a foolish woman. And he would be relieved almost to the pitch of disappointment if, for only 1/2 hour in that day, the enemy said, now you may go and abuse yourself. Now, if he thinks about his assumption for a moment, even he is bound to realize that he is actually in this situation every day. When I speak of preserving this assumption in his mind, therefore, the last thing I mean you to do is to furnish him with arguments in its defense. There aren't any. Your task is purely negative. Don't let his thoughts come anywhere near it. Wrap a darkness around it. And in the center of that darkness, let his sense of ownership in time lie silent, uninspected, and operative. The sense of ownership in general is always to be encouraged. The humans are always putting up claims to ownership which sound equally funny in heaven and in hell, and we must keep them doing so. Much of the modern resistance to chastity comes from men's belief that they own their bodies, those vast and perilous estates pulsing with the energy that made the world, in which they find themselves without their consent and from which they are ejected at the pleasure of another. It is as if a royal child, whom his father has placed for love's sake in titular command of some great province under the real rule of wise counselors, should come to fancy he really owns the cities, the forests, and the court in the same way as he owns the bricks on the nursery floor. We produce this sense of ownership not only by pride but by confusion. We teach them not to notice the different senses of the possessive pronoun, the finely graded differences that run from my boots through my dog, my servant, my wife, my father, my master, and my country to my God. They can be taught to reduce all these senses to that of my boots, the my of ownership, even in the nursery. A child can be taught to mean by my teddy bear, not the old imagined recipient of affection to whom it stands in a special relation, for that is what the enemy will teach them to mean if we're not careful, but the bear I can pull to pieces if I like. And at the other end of the scale, we have taught men to say, my God, in a sense not really very different from my boots, meaning the God on whom I have a claim for my distinguished services, and whom I exploit from the pulpit. And all the time, the joke is that the word mine, in its fully possessive sense, cannot be uttered by a human being about anything. In the long run, either our Father, or the enemy, will say mine of everything that exists, and especially of each man. They will find out in the end, never fear, to whom their time, their souls, and their bodies really belong. Certainly not to them, whatever happens. At present, the enemy says mine of everything on the pedantic, legalistic ground that he made it. Our Father hopes in the end to say mine of all things on the more realistic and dynamic ground of conquest. Your affectionate uncle, Screwtape.
Oh, Elise is just so good. All right. Time. Did this ring a bell with anybody? Just a little covetous of our time, my time. I want to take my time. I certainly see as well as anybody. It really is, though. He brings it to almost an absurd level, but I think it's a very real level. I think that everybody would be much better off if we thought about how transitory and fleeting everything really is, and how indefinite things really are. Because if we could do that, we would, as people of faith, lean on or lean more toward the only thing that is permanent, and that is assured, and that is stable and able to depend upon, and that's God. That's it. I think if you're in church, you probably heard in the last probably 4 weeks the gospel lessons that I preached on, where and we did this in when we did the Bible study on the book of Revelation. I asked everybody in the book of Revelation when we started, I said, what is the if you go back from Revelation, you go back to Genesis, at the very beginning of Genesis, what is the primary what's the word is primary of what God is communicating to everybody in creation? And almost everybody says love. Love. God loves. God created out of love. God loves all people. God, it's love. Even go to St. John. John says God is love. So it's right there. God created Adam and Eve and he loved them. Right? That's not it. When we read the actual words in Genesis, and then you can keep reading, but you can jump to Revelation. What you hear is dominion. Oh, in Genesis and in Revelation, God begins by saying and ends by saying, this is all mine. It's mine. I created everything. You are mine. This is mine. Everything is mine. And it's very clear. It's not, he doesn't say, I'm creating you because I love you and that's just it. It's just love. He's saying, I created you and you are mine. You belong to me. You're my possession. You're not your own. Me. That's the answer. It's always going to be me. It starts with me, ends with me. It's me. So it was shocking when we did this in the Bible study. People really didn't see it, but I can't do it here. But if we went back and got these texts, I could show you very clearly where God is very, very clear that it's not about love. Love is there, of course. God is love, but that the words given to at the beginning and the end is that this is mine, and you're part of this. You belong to me. So if we had that really in our head and in our heart, we would never fall into the problem of depending upon something like time as mine. Never count anything as mine, my stuff, this is why this is the great witness of the saints, right? Through the even the common era, even the modern period, saints that give up everything. They give up all their possessions, all their stuff. Saint Francis of Assisi is a great example, although he's far from being the only one. He's just the most famous one. He's the heir apparent, the only son of the most affluent fabric merchant in Venice, or in Assisi rather. And by all accounts, in the era that he was in, a millionaire, and he would never go out of business. He had access to dyes and had created cloths that people came from all over the province to buy this cloth from him, and they were talking about nobles. And so Francis is that's his now. He's going to inherit that. That's for him, and it's going to be even more by the time he gets old enough to take it over. And he gives up it all, everything. Never looks back, never regrets it, never stops, ever. And when you ask him later on in the remembrances of the Franciscan order, they talk to him about what he owns, and it befuddles him. He's like, I don't own anything. They say, well, you're wearing the tunic, and he's like, you want it? You want these sandals? Here, you can have them. And he's not kidding. He's saying nothing of this belongs to me. There's no purpose in owning this. I am owned. I belong to God. And everything that I'm doing as a messenger, as a part of God's purpose on earth. So for me to think about ownership is just a distraction. It's me trying to be like God in a finite sense by lording over something, not necessarily a person, but an object, by lording over this object. And when I lord over this object and I make it mine, I'm shrinking the space in me instead of opening the space in me to God. So I'm taking something, I'm sticking in it. And when I thought about this, I thought about dropping, I can't remember what it was. You can do it with a trash can. Put the trash bag over the trash can and then drop something in it. And the trash bag goes and folds over the whole thing and disappears. That's what's happening. We're all the way open for God, but we're dropping something in that we own. It's ours. It closes up that space because now our focus is on the thing that we own, not on the God who owns us. And for a large extent, when I taught this way back in the day, people don't like it because we don't like the idea of being owned, of being beholden to something or someone else. But that perspective does not take in the relationship that we have or the spiritual reality of the communion fellowship of God.
I think what bothers me more than that, because I'm like, yeah, God is God. He created me. Yeah, I was never just myself. It's more like if I have I don't know, a mug that my father gave me. I love it. It's great. It's beautiful. It's the first mug I ever got. It's like, is that distracting me from God? How can how can that be? And I'm just like, I don't want to, think like that. And it's very valid. And it's just like, it's complicated.
There's no when you really get into the saints and the writings across the centuries, there is no disagreement on this point. None at all. Not from Benedict or Dominic, from Thomas Aquinas, from the greatest monastic minds you can think of, Mother Teresa. You think about anybody who's written, they've all written. If you have a writer, every one of these people has written specifically at some point about this. Some of them huge amounts, like Albert the Great, who is Albertus Magnus. You know that we have in history, there's different people called the Great. Alexander the Great. Well, the Great is an actual title. that's bestowed upon a person based on the accomplishments of their life. And so
Mhm.
you're not called the great until after you're dead. It's basically a posthumous title that's given to somebody, because after they die, everybody realizes what incredible things they did when they were alive, and they say that this person was great, and that's Alexander the Great. Albertus Magnus, Albert the Great, is one of the only people in history that was given that title before he died. He was so prolific, and his intellect and his influence spread so completely across the world that people were calling him the Great long before he died. Like, we're not talking like he's on his deathbed. We're talking like 20 years before he died. Could have blown his mind up, right? Could have made him all hoity, like, I'm the only one in the world called the Great. Not at all. He wrote 2 books. One's called Cleaving to God, and the other one is Unity with God. And both of those books are just what we're saying here in the most beautiful language over and over again, addressing chapter by chapter the slivers of our lives. You know, in this circumstance, in this life, with this kind of living, this is how you deal with your life based on being owned by God. And then it goes on to the next one, and the next one, and the next one. Not 1 book, but 2. So it is a biblical truth, a theological truth. It's just contingent on us as how we integrate this into our lives. So, Auden, your comment's great. So I own a lot of stuff here, man. Like this book right here. My book. This is a great book. This is one of my Greek books, and I love this book. So the question is, if somebody walked in the door and said, I really like that book, can I have it? Then I should say, yeah, here you go. It's not mine. I'm just using it. So if you want it, it's yours. You can have it. Of course, it's not yours either. I hope you give it away when it's time, because the person would come. So knowing that I would not like to do that, you know, how do I live with this thing or these things with the knowledge that I shouldn't? There has to be a place where I do have it, but I would give it away. I do have these things, but they don't mean anything to me. It's nice to have this lamp, but I would be happy if someone took it and I wouldn't be worried about it. You know, this also goes back with Magnus wrote another bit where he talks about the same thing. And this is St. Alphonsus. Alphonsus writes a book where he talks about everything that happens to us, the good things, the bad things, the painful things, whether it's emotional or mental or physical. All of these things we should constantly and without fail thank God for. Thank God for everything that happens, even the bad, you know, especially the bad things, because he's saying in the place of, because we're broken, the earth's broken, we're entropic, we're breaking down. This is not how God planned it. So bad things are going to happen to good people simply because this is the water that we're swimming in. So he's saying that every time we are confronted by a challenge, by something that hurts us, by something that sets us back, something that we don't like, it is an opportunity to grow deeper in relationship and understanding of the person of God, because I've just been shown, like, this person said this thing and it hurt my feelings and I feel hurt. But there is a whole spiritual reality beyond this that says, if I was aware of myself, I wouldn't be hurt. I wouldn't be hurt at all. It's what that person is saying is not really about me. It's about them. They're saying it, not me. I know who I am. I'm loved by God. I'm created by God. I'm owned by God. I'm precious in God's sight. I'm beautiful. I'm wonderful. I'm the most important person in the world to God. So this person here is in pain. They're in anguish. There's heartache. There's disruption. There's an inability to understand that. They don't know that they're loved this way. So by the person saying this, instead of feeling hurt in myself, I am immediately thrown toward God and thanking God for the revelation again of God's own love for me, God's ownership of me, God's presence in my life, God's companionship in my life over and over and over again. So Alphonsus just goes through the whole book doing this, with one thing after another, after another, after another. So next time you get into something that hurts, stub your
Thank
toe.
God.
Wait. You say how painful it is. You just we're supposed to turn back to God and say, thank you for this opportunity to pray and to ask you for help and to turn to you in a time of need and to know that you're there and that you love me and that it's important. Every single, it actually works. I think it's really a wild thing. It's almost like any habit that we have. You'll know Pavlov, right? Pavlov's dog.
Oh,
Hear the bell and the dog
oh,
stops. Right?
oh no.
So it's really the kind of same thing. What we should be doing is attaching to the pain, whatever it is, physical, mental, emotional, whatever we have, something that pricks us and makes us feel otherly, that should immediately turn us to God without even thinking about it. We should go straight to God in thanksgiving for God's presence and God's love and God's perfection. So it would, if you think about it, if we're able to do that, then it makes the process less. And if it is not a physical pain, like my appendicitis, my belly's just going to keep hurting. If it's an emotional pain or a mental pain, then there's the real possibility of complete relief. Because the mental, like I say, the mental pain is my pain based on what? My feelings are hurt. And if my feelings are hurt, but my feelings are hurt because I'm having the focus is on me. As soon as I turn to God, my focus turns away from me and turns to God, and now I see everything differently. This is like I've said this before. The person in the road that gives me the finger, passes me by and gives me the finger, I pray for them right away. Because I think what terrible life this person really has, whether they know it or not, that they are angry, they are crude, they're rude people, and that's the way that they live their life. And there must be problems in that. Maybe they're not loved. Maybe they'll never be loved. Maybe they'll, live a sad, sad life for their whole life long, and this will be the kind of person that they are. So that's a horrible idea. I don't know these people at all, but yeah, turning him giving me the finger is not saying that I'm this horrible person. That's not it. It's really him or her, the case may be. All right, so that is a place we got to stop 3.5 minutes after. We're on to 22. Is it 22 next week? And another rip roaring time together. So thanks so much for coming, guys. This is really great. Really enjoyed it.
Before you go, Father, could I set up a meeting with you over email
Yeah,
next week?
absolutely. Just shoot me one. We'll look at calendars.
Sure. Thank you.
Absolutely. All right, guys. Have a blessed night and good sleep.
All right, bye.
Bye, everybody. Have a good week, everybody.
All right, bye-bye, honey.
Bye, Mom.